ChatGerry, post-stroke travel to Hawaii, number 1558, the 4th of March 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category, Neurology, stroke recovery. A real-life recovery test. I had a hemorrhagic stroke on June 21, 2025. During the following 8 months I went through continuous testing, observation, and recovery. On February 28, 2026 I took my first airplane trip after the stroke and traveled to Honolulu, Hawaii. This trip was not simply a vacation. I deliberately used it as a real-life field test to evaluate my neurological recovery. Within the first 3 days after arriving in Honolulu, I noticed clear observations about my brain function. First, I realized that I had lost a small portion of my memory. Certain places, store names, and people that I used to know in Honolulu were temporarily missing from my memory. At first this surprised me. However, after walking around the neighborhood and revisiting familiar locations, many of those memories gradually came back piece by piece. This experience taught me that the memories were not erased. The retrieval pathways had simply become weaker. Once the brain received environmental stimulation again, those pathways could reconnect. Based on my own observation, I estimate that roughly about 10% of my old memories were temporarily difficult to retrieve. Second, my cognitive capability and research creativity appeared to remain strong. During the past 8 months of recovery, new research ideas have continued to appear in my mind almost every day. That pattern has not changed. In fact, during this Hawaii trip I even started to self-study epilepsy and seizure mechanisms as a new learning subject within my broader neurology research. Third, my emotional sensitivity hasn't changed. I still feel deeply touched when I see the difficult lives of poor people on the street. My emotional response to human suffering remains the same as before the stroke. In some ways it may even be slightly stronger. Why stroke feels different from other diseases? Over the past 3 decades, I have experienced several chronic diseases, including metabolic disorders affecting my heart and kidneys. Those illnesses certainly caused physical damage. However, they did not disturb the center of perception itself. My brain remained the observer that could analyze and manage the disease. Stroke is very different. Stroke affects the brain itself, which is the organ responsible for thinking, observation, memory, and emotional response. When the brain is injured, the observer and the damaged system become the same entity. That makes the experience much more delicate and difficult to describe. My engineering background provides a useful analogy. Earlier in my career I worked with 2 very different types of systems. One type involved large mechanical or structural systems such as pipes, machinery, and reinforced structures. The other involved semiconductor integrated circuit chips containing microscopic transistors and tiny signal pathways. Mechanical systems are usually robust. When damage occurs, it tends to be visible and localized. Engineers can often identify a crack, deformation, or broken component. Semiconductor chip systems behave very differently. A tiny disturbance in a microscopic transistor or an almost invisible defect in a signal path can disrupt the entire logic flow of the system. The physical damage may be extremely small, but its functional consequences can spread throughout the entire network. My personal experience with stroke feels much closer to the semiconductor chip system. The hemorrhage in my brain occurred in the pontine region and was physically small. However, the functional impact was much greater than I had expected. Certain memories temporarily disappeared, which might have been related to epilepsy. Some cognitive pathways began to behave differently and in fact appeared stronger than before. My emotional sensitivity also changed slightly. The brain as a network system. From a systems engineering perspective, I often describe the human body using simple functional analogies. My brain functions like the central processing unit CPU of a computer system. It receives signals, processes information, stores memory, and issues commands. My heart functions like a pump that circulates blood throughout the body. My kidneys operate like a filtration system that removes waste and maintains fluid balance. When the pump or filtration system has problems, the brain can still observe and analyze the situation. But when the brain itself is affected, even a small disturbance can influence the entire network of memory, perception, thinking, and behavior. This explains why stroke feels so different from other organ diseases. Neuroplasticity during recovery. Fortunately, the brain has an extraordinary ability called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means the brain can reorganize its internal neural networks after injury. When one pathway is damaged, Other regions may gradually strengthen alternative communication routes. Because of this process, stroke recovery often appears uneven. Some abilities recover quickly, others take longer. Occasionally, new cognitive strengths appear during the reorganization process. My personal observation during recovery. During my recovery, I noticed an interesting paradox. Some of my memories, especially spatial memories such as street layouts and store names, became temporarily weaker. However, my ability to generate new ideas and recognize patterns appears to have become stronger. In fact, I sometimes feel that my pattern recognition ability has increased to 2-3 times compared with before the stroke. When I look at pathophysiological datasets, such as blood glucose or blood pressure charts, I can often see the entire pattern almost instantly. Within seconds, I can understand my current physiological state, the likely cause, the direction of change, and the areas that require attention. One possible explanation involves neuroplasticity. When the brain repairs itself, it redistributes its functional workload across different regions. Some pathways weaken, while others become stronger. A simple analogy is opening old filing cabinets in order to retrieve forgotten files. This process may explain why I can now easily apply stochastic process methods and topology concepts that I learned more than 50 years ago but had not used for decades. These ideas suddenly became useful again in my current medical research work. Another possible factor is a temporary reduction in cognitive filtering. Normally, the brain filters out many thoughts before they reach conscious awareness. During neurological recovery, some inhibitory circuits may temporarily weaken. As a result, more ideas may reach conscious awareness. Finally, my attention to internal physiological signals has become much sharper since the stroke. I now observe my body continuously. This heightened awareness allows me to detect subtle patterns that I might have ignored in the past. For example, I recently developed a stroke risk triggering sensibility index (TSI) that provides early warning signals before dangerous blood pressure spikes. Conclusion: for me, this recovery process remains both mysterious and fascinating. The stroke damaged a small portion of my brain, but it also revealed how adaptable the brain can be. Some functions weakened, while others strengthened. Memory retrieval continues to recover gradually, while pattern recognition and idea generation remain highly active. I will continue to observe these changes carefully and document them as part of my effort to better understand the relationship between brain structure, physiological stress, and cognitive function. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.